Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Reflecting Forward. I'm your host, Pierre Quinn, and you're joining us for episode number five. Episode number five of our Reflecting Forward series. Reflecting Forward is the space for us as leaders to look back with clarity so that we can move forward with certainty. Now, I know I'm throwing some of y'all off by coming to you on a Monday night because ever since we started season 2 of our Reflecting Forward series, we've been telling you we will be here every second and fourth Sunday of the month. Every second and fourth Sunday of the month. That's the time for us to reflect forward. So why are we hanging out on a Monday night in December? Well, one of the reasons why we're doing this is because as we get closer to the end of the year, we recognize people are taking time off, you're going offline, and some of us are trying to cram in as much as we possibly can before we flip over to the new year. So we got, let's call this 3 nights of clarity that we'll be spending together: Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, live at 7 p.m. Eastern time in our Reflecting Forward format. Now, I got to tell you, I'm excited. I know I said it last week, the last episode 4, when we had a conversation with Joe Pettit, our guest, on moving beyond the titles, and we had a really, really great conversation on accountability and really getting closer to understanding how do we set the terms and conditions for our working relationships and beyond. And I'm telling y'all, I'm excited about tonight's conversation. And I know I say that every time. And the reason why I say that is because our team has this way of bringing on some of the most incredible guests to share with you here on Reflecting Forward. I know tonight will be no exception. We get to hang out with my friend and my colleague, Rebecca. But before we get to her, I know you're going to have some questions. Feel free, if you're watching this on YouTube or on LinkedIn, feel free to drop your questions, drop your comments into the chat, and we will get to those in our final segment: questions, comments, and answers. But before we get there, we got to shout out a couple of our sponsors, the organizations that actually help us do what we do, help us bring Reflecting Forward to you. Shout out to Composition, yourcomposition.com. Our producer, Kirk Nugent, who's pressing all of the buttons behind the scenes and making sure we are streaming live to you, or that you're hanging out and watching the replay of this. We got to thank diagirl.com, Dia Girl Custom Virtual Services, that handles a lot of our flow and our processes, our procedures, making sure we have everything running in the background as well from an admin perspective. We got a whole host of other members of our team. We got our producers, we got Kat, we got Megan, we got a whole lot in the background that really help to make this possible. And many of those individuals are actually part of the Cardell Group team. That's us at thecardellgroup.com. And for us at the Cardell Group, people are everything. That's why we design our keynotes, our workshops, our custom leadership development programs to help your people, to help you better lead yourself, better lead your team, and ultimately better lead the organizations and that you're called to serve. Learn more about us. I know you've been on the website quite a few times, but you can learn more about us if this is your first time hanging out with us at thecardellgroup.com. That's thecardellgroup.com. All right. I love the interview conversations that we have, and a special place in my heart is for our segment called Leadership in the News. Now, before we get there, got to give you a couple points that are really important. I told you as we started this conversation, the same way we do every single time, the importance of reflecting forward. This is the space. We're going to hang out tonight and Tuesday and Wednesday to continue in this theme. This is the space that we look forward, we look back with clarity so that we can move forward with certainty. And why is that important? Because in today's world, we recognize that a lot of the leaders that we encounter, and sometimes we're guilty of this as well, sometimes we're guilty of not leveraging self-awareness. As James Clear puts it, a lack of self-awareness is poison, but reflection and review are the antidote. And this final quote, I know our guest tonight really loves this one. I've seen her use it in her talks as well. We don't learn from experience, folks. John Dewey puts it. We don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on the experience. That's why we hang out here. We reflect, we pull things into the hindsight box, because hindsight is 2020. And when we look back on things, we see a little bit clearer. we look back with clarity so that we can move forward with certainty. Let's talk about leadership in the news. Leadership in the news is where, when we go out and we find articles in newspapers, magazines, maybe popular news outlets, and talk about where these articles and insights and examples connect with some of the leadership principles that we share here on Reflecting Forward. And I got this one all the way, producer, you can make this big on the screen for us. I got this one all the way from Florida, back in September of this year. There's an employee by the name of Sheila. Sheila Williams has worked for a drive-through restaurant in Florida for nearly 40 years, 37 years behind the counter. Her impact in this community was so huge that they said, and that's a picture of Sheila and co-owner John, co-owner of Max Drive-Through in Gainesville, Florida. So impactful for nearly 40 years behind the counter. They said, we are going to really go all out and celebrate Sheila. She retired in October of 2024. And this is what happened. October 11, they said, they're going to make this an amazing day for Sheila, an amazing, amazing day. And they asked for everyone who had been impacted by Sheila in the nearly 40 years of service behind the counter at Max Drive-In to come out. Pack out the place, pack out the neighborhood, show your love and support. And the lines were just wrapped through the neighborhoods, and they brought her flowers and balloons and really, really celebrated Sheila. This touch, though, this really took it over the top for me. And the co-owner said, here's what they're going to do. On Sheila's last day, all the revenue from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on the last day, they were going to cash Sheila out for her years of dedication, for her years of service. Everything that was made from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., they were going to turn those funds over to Sheila. Now, this is really important, because in our conversation today about believing in the skills of others and empowering others to lead, and how do we do that? How do we create a culture of celebration and a recognition? The reason why I put this story up, because I wanted to juxtapose it with this story. This made viral rounds about 2 years ago. An individual by the name of, I believe, Kevin Ford. And Kevin Ford worked for Burger King in his hometown, or in his town, for 28 years. Kevin never missed a day of work. And in 2022, it went viral that on Kevin's last day of work, as he was preparing to retire, they gave Kevin a goodie bag. It had a gift certificate to a movie theater, it had a bag of candy, a couple of pens, a few other trinkets. And that went viral because people were saying, after 27 years of never missing a day of work, this is how you treat somebody? This is how you treat somebody after 27 years of never missing a day? Story went so viral, they posted it. They posted a GoFundMe for Kevin, one of his daughters did. And it was somewhere around $400,000 was raised in donations to the internet, to create an opportunity for the internet to celebrate Kevin for his 27 years of service to Burger King. Now, Kevin went on to buy a house. He started a food truck. He did all of these amazing things because the community celebrated him when the organization did not. And it got me to thinking, how often does this happen? What are those stories of someone working for so many years for an organization and maybe getting a watch or a clock or some other trinket that in no way can capture the amount of impact that they've had on an organization? And what are some of the little things that we do as leaders? Maybe we don't pay a lot of attention to it, but some of the little things that we do as leaders that go to really deter our organization from celebrating our people. And what are some of the little things that we do as leaders that we want to pat ourselves on the back for, but can't really check off the box? A pizza party, or a gift certificate, or leaving work a couple of hours early. that we say our recognition, we say our thank you, but they don't really go a long way in helping us empower and celebrate others so they can be successful and our organization can be successful as well. Listen, y'all, I know we celebrate the internets. The internets sometimes let us down, but we celebrate the internets for their recognition and their contributing to Kevin Ford's journey and his celebration and his recognition. And we want to continue the conversation and talk through what are some of the things that we can do as leaders in our sphere of influence. We're not always CEOs, we're not always co-founders or co-owners, but we can do a little bit more to empower others to succeed and recognize their contributions to our organization, to our teams. We're going to have that conversation, and I look forward to having it with our special guest on this Monday night segment of Reflecting Forward, and we will go to her after this short break. Okay, Reflecting Forward, episode 5. I am joined by my friend, my colleague. We worked together for a couple of years now. Whenever we hang out together, we always have a really, really good time. And as part of my role in one of the organizations that we partner in, I get to introduce her all of the time. I always get to introduce her. But tonight, as in previous episodes, I'm going to allow our guest to introduce herself, just so I don't mess it up. So the floor is yours. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you. I can think of nowhere else that I would rather be on a Monday night than hanging out with you, Pierre. So thank you for the invitation kindly. Rebecca Cardenas, let's see, by background, I'm an organizational psychologist, which just means I should know something about human behavior at work and teamwork and sort of how we can put some good practices into motion to work better together. Before I get further into me, can I comment on your segment? I have a thought about.
I was waiting for it.
Okay, I always do, Pierre. So, it's interesting. A few years ago, I had a doctoral student who was very interested in leadership in the fast food industry. So since you brought it up, I gotta say, yeah. So if you've ever studied leadership, you've probably heard the term transformational leadership, right? Is this style that we may want to emulate. We want to be good role models, all of these things. Well, up until this point, all of the research had been done in professional settings. And I had this doctoral student that said, wonder if it applies to fast food settings. I wonder if that style of leadership would still work if we recognize the Sheilas of the world in good, impactful, meaningful ways. So he did some studies across all the southern half of the United States and pleasantly surprised to find that the same things hold true. People need to feel motivated. They need to feel encouraged. They need to feel seen, to your point. They need to feel like there's growth opportunity, even when they're doing an hourly wage sort of job. So it was really cool to see that all those good things that we learned about leadership apply to that setting as well. So thank you for sharing that research piece.
This is what I love about my conversation with Rebecca. We've been able to converse over a number of years with people who are really, really good subject matter experts. And then you layer on top of that really, really good speakers. And then you layer on top of that really good facilitators and orchestrators. Well, all you got to do is just throw a couple of alley-oops. Just throw a couple of alley-oops up there and they will grab it. They'll run with it. And that was a great example of that. Okay, Rebecca, I got to know, take us on the journey. How did you get into the whole IO psychology space and what's the context of the work that you do today?
Yeah, thank you. So when I was an undergrad, I started as a business major, as many of us that don't exactly know what we want to do. No offense to those that stayed there. I loved the idea of the workplace, but I took a psychology class my first semester and I fell in love. Like, what is it about all of us as humans that makes us tick? Those differences, understanding what each of us brings to the table and how that impacts our interactions. I kind of fell in love with the idea of better understanding all of us. And so I remember going to my psychology professor and saying, wait a second, I wish there was something that combined psychology and business. And she said, there is, and I have a PhD in it, and it's called IO psychology. And she said, oh, by the way, it's the highest paid part of psychology. And I said, sign me up, I'm in. So 7 short years later, after I finished undergrad and had a couple kids and did some internships and learned a little bit along the way, I was often running in the field. So I was really fortunate to partner with some great folks up at BASF, the German chemical company. They kind of got my start working there on some business process optimization stuff. And then I worked with various consulting firms, kind of doing some leadership space stuff, doing some hiring stuff, all the technical side of IO psychology, as well as the fun practical implementation for leaders. And then 6 years ago, kind of went out on my own and said, I want to do the pieces that I love. I really want to try to help people. I really want to see the talent in them and sort of help them see it themselves and figure out how they can leverage that to get from point A to point B. So kind of some coaching, some leadership stuff, and here we are.
Let's go back a little bit. When you think about the early days of being in your career, who are some of the names of individuals that come to mind, boss or colleague that really helped maybe shape or guide, or even if it was a little bit of tough love in teaching you the ropes? Who were some of those integral pieces to your success in your journey early on?
Yeah, so I have one in particular. I'm going to give a shout out to her. There's a brilliant woman named Alexis Fink. She's sort of a celebrity in my field. She sort of anyone who's an IO psychologist will know who I'm talking about. But for me, she was the first female that showed me that I could do all that I wanted to do and have a family and make it all work. She happened to teach a class that I took in graduate school. She graduated from my program years ahead of me. She moved on to work at Microsoft and Intel and, all sorts of brilliant places, head of people analytics. She's a brilliant mind, but she's a kind, intelligent human who taught me to believe in myself, take chances, and be okay with not knowing everything on day one. So she's really, really been a huge inspiration to me. And she let me sleep on the floor when I was a broke graduate student and couldn't afford to go to conferences. So there's always that as well.
We love having those people who they seem to just come along at the right time, and they get it, and you click, and they're a crucial part of they're a crucial part of your journey. And then in many ways, as we move forward in the narrative, you have become that for so many leaders. You seem to just come along at just the right time to help them, to encourage them, to maybe help some of them pick up the pieces or put things back on track. With that in mind, and maybe put your executive coaching hat on. There are a lot of times when as leaders, we assume our situation is unique. Or our situation is different, or you've never heard this challenge before. What are some of the common things that leaders who sit at middle to senior levels of the organization have to deal with, or maybe ask you how to navigate the challenge, especially when it comes to leading teams and dealing with people?
It's a great question. I'm doing a women in leadership program right now, and I'm coaching 16 women at that mid to senior level leadership. And, the thing that probably makes me the saddest in terms of everything that I get asked to coach on, going back to today's sort of topic, is lack of confidence in who they are and finding their own personal leadership work style and bringing that to the table. So a theme across all of my client organizations, I always say, what's the highest currency? And it's usually the technical knowledge, the thing that we do better than our competition. And so you're expected to know everything about everything. And so I have way too many leaders wasting a whole lot of time trying to know everything about everything instead of swimming downstream with the strengths that they have. They're trying to be all things to all people all of the time. And so I think if I could give any encouragement to any leader, it's find the thing, as Liz Wiseman says, your native strength, the thing that you do better than everyone else without trying so hard, and do more of that. So it's hard enough to be a leader when things are going well, but when times are challenging and the organization's struggling and the team isn't where you want it to be, when you are trying to do the things that aren't a natural fit for you, it becomes that much harder. So leaning into that, and as leaders, seeing those things in other people and kind of pulling that out of them, I think is kind of where we are. Pierre, you know, I have a son playing college level sports, and you know, I can't have any conversation without bringing that up. You know, I think the thing that I equate this whole confidence thing to, there's something going on in organizations today, much like in sports, where right before we send people onto the field or we send them out to work on that new project, we say something that's essentially the equivalent of, well, I don't know if I can trust you back there. I need you to not mess this up. I really hope you get this right. This is really visible. This is really important. This is really high stakes. And then we expect these people to show up as their most confident self and knock it out of the park, when the last thing we said before we sent them out there was, please don't mess this up. Who's that a reflection on? It's not about them. It's about us. Yeah.
So, I mean, incredible piece right there for all of you who are listening live or watching the replay of this. Well, ask yourself, that's an internal reflection question there. What's the last thing that you say to a person before they're getting ready to give the big presentation or go into a really big meeting or even go home for the weekend? What's the last thing that you say to them, and how could that be impacting their decision making and their processing and even their ability to focus on what's really, really important? Are you tearing them down to that moment, or are you, according to our theme for the day, empowering them for leadership? Rebecca, you got some wonderful stories. I've heard a handful of them over the years, and I get excited every time you tell them. And it's one story in particular that whenever you get ready to set the story up, I perk up just a little bit. And it's directly related to how we show up and confidence in the workplace. You got this story where someone wrote to you and they said to you, thank you for what you did for our leader. Thank you. You walk them through this coaching journey because this person was not showing up as themselves and they did not have that confidence that they needed. Give us a little bit of that experience, and also what is it like for you as a coach to be able to see that development in the people that you work with?
Yeah. You know, let me start with this. I always say, because coaching is not always easy, because it requires people to be vulnerable, right? And tell me the parts of themselves that they're not super proud of in the moment, or maybe they don't feel super great about. So I always say, I care about you too much to leave you where you are. That's where we have to start, right? I want to help you get to where you're going, not where I want you to be, but where you're trying to be. So with that sort of context, the story that you're speaking about, and maybe some of your listeners can relate to this, it was a woman who had always been hugely successful as a leader of individual contributors. And when she tried to make that tough leap of leading through other leaders, she found it to be a bit more stressful. And so in times when she historically would have shown, she found herself sort of losing her composure, getting frustrated more often, being short with people. Her behavior just wasn't representative of how she wanted to show up as a leader. And so I was sort of called in to speak with her, and she wanted to change. She wasn't really sure when it had gone sideways or what she was doing wrong. And so in her case, it was really just a matter of helping her kind of hold up that mirror, find her common triggers, figure out under those circumstances, what were the common themes of what was going wrong? Was it certain times of day or certain types of situations or certain people that she maybe didn't click with? But why was that happening? And once we could find the pattern, then she could change the pattern of behavior and see it coming and choose to show up in a different way. So over the course of about 4 months, we just sort of worked together to figure out what was not working. And she kept a little bit of a journal even on how she had shown up in ways that she was proud of versus those that weren't serving her or her team well. And to your point, at the end of it, we were fortunate enough to resurvey her team, and her scores went up drastically. And someone, as you said, called into HR and said, we don't know what you did, but we're so thankful to have our leader back. And I think when you ask the question about what did I learn from that, the part that was most satisfying was this recognition that there was no grandiose change. She hadn't suddenly become something other than what she was.
Yeah.
She just needed to believe in herself. And I needed to help her see that if she wanted to change, she absolutely could. She just had to figure out which things she needed to tweak.
These coaching conversations, sometimes, as you mentioned before, they can be uncomfortable because this vulnerability is on display. And as much as the person or persons, if it's a group context, are willing to lean in. And sometimes we don't always want to lean into that difficulty or that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes even as leaders, we don't want our teams to experience this discomfort. Sometimes we think we're saving them. There's a common anecdote. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe you do, but this anecdote of a man who's walking along a path one day and he sees a caterpillar struggling to get out of the cocoon. So he cuts the cocoon, and because he cuts the cocoon, then the caterpillar doesn't have the struggle to actually turn into a butterfly. I don't know who created that so many years ago, but we hear it told so many times. But there's some truth to it. And for you and the work that you do and the things that you've observed, what happens when a leader doesn't? What's the missed opportunity when a leader doesn't allow for some of that discomfort or some of that struggle to happen as they're wanting to actually get the best out of their people? What happens when they remove that struggle?
It's a great question. And the difficulty when we remove that struggle, it's usually from a place of good intent. We think we're protecting them. We think we're giving them time and space to get comfortable and acclimated. And the way you've probably heard me say it is we're robbing them of the chance to grow faster. And all of our efforts to do right by them, we're sort of slowing down their growth. And I know I equate leadership to parenting entirely too often, but it's the thing I know with 3 teenagers, right? And I sometimes think, if I jump in and save them from every struggle that they're going to face, then when a real big one comes along, they haven't had the little ones to prepare them to take that big one on. So as a leader, I have to be willing to let them struggle with the little things. So when the big things come, they've built that confidence that they can get through it and they'll find the path forward.
Oh, that's good. That's good. If I take away the little ones, the little struggles, how will they be prepared for the bigger ones? We could hang out a long time just talking about teenagers and struggles. There's another piece of this though, and a lot of this is connected to one of the topics that you often teach on, and that's psychological safety. And part of empowering others to lead is creating the space to have those struggle moments in learning, realizing we're not always going to get this right. And we're not going to penalize you for the growth journey. We're not going to penalize you on the path for taking the initiative or willing to try, as long as it's clear that we're learning and growing from this. Psychological safety is big talk now. I think in the last, if we go back to the beginning of COVID, so for at least the last 4 years, maybe ever since Tim Clark came out with his doctoral research, I don't know, but psychological safety has been top of mind for a lot of people. And even as we're changing from one year to the next, or organization emphasis are changing, it's still there. What are some of the things that we commonly get wrong? Psychological safety as a whole, but also from the aspect of how we welcome people and give them the opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah. So, as you know, learner safety is one of the facets of that, right? Are we giving them the chance to experiment, to try, to fail fast, to learn, and to keep growing? I just kind of had a tough conversation today with a woman that I was coaching actually on this topic. And part of the topic of psychological safety being admitting our mistakes. And she was very uncomfortable and in fact pushed back on me a little bit and said, I thought you said there wasn't one version of right and wrong leadership, but you're saying I have to admit my mistakes. Why is that? And I said, well, I'm not saying you have to, but I am telling you that if you want your people to be willing and able to admit theirs and not hide them from you, then it makes it a whole lot easier for them to do that if you're willing to do that yourself. And so I think that's one of the things that early on in our careers as leaders, we don't feel safe to do ourselves because we're still proving ourselves. We're still trying to make a name for where we are. And so if I admit that I'm wrong, right, or I don't know something, then I'm going to lose ground. And I don't have as much of that currency to spend as if I constantly demonstrate my technical knowledge and I'm the loudest voice in the room. So I think sort of creating space for others to do just that allows them to have that growth trajectory at a much faster pace.
There's the technical knowledge that you mentioned. One of the things that we see as a consistent challenge is when we have these individual contributors who, in many cases, are brilliant technically, or they've developed the acumen, the pace, the understanding of how to be an amazing individual contributor. And many of them are promoted. Now they're over a team of people who are doing the job as a team that they did so well as an individual contributor. And there is some tension there. Now, instead of doing the thing, they have to empower, coach, mentor other people to do the thing. What advice do you commonly give when you see organizations or leaders who are making that transition? How do I get to a place now where I can be an effective people leader when I was an effective individual contributor before?
I often say things like letting go of the work on your plate is not letting go of your own effectiveness. It's just moving it into a different sort of capacity, right? And so again, that's that wisdom, that maturity. It's sort of accepting the responsibility of leadership, which is really this acknowledgement of it's no longer about me. It's about leading through others. And so it's giving yourself the freedom to change your mindset from my worth, my accomplishment is the doing of the tasks, to my worth, my accomplishment is setting others up for success to do the task, whether that's enabling them by giving them the resources or motivating them or encouraging them or even, dare I say, inspiring them. It's helping give them what they need to be successful. And then that's how your success is defined on behalf of the business. But that requires that mindset shift of how you measure your own effectiveness in the workplace. And that's tough for folks. It also, the other piece of that I find that they struggle with as they're getting more and more comfortable with it is they sort of feel like, well, I didn't do anything today. I'm like, well, how many people came and told you their problems? Oh, you did a lot today. How many people did you help figure out where they need to develop next? Oh, you did a lot today. You just didn't have a checklist that had task after task and project deadline on it. So it's a little bit of a mental shift, but when you make that leap, it's also really rewarding.
There's I'm really going to mess this up, but there's a famous Colin Powell quote that speaks to that. And it talks about more or less the sentiment of, your effectiveness as a leader is dwindling when soldiers stop coming to you with their problems.
That's right.
When they stop coming to you and telling you what's going on or what's going wrong, you've lost that trust and that connection that we're in such desperate need of as leaders. There's one more story I'm going to ask you to tell as we're wrapping up this conversation. I know we could talk and we can go all day. You tell this powerful story about what it means in a practical sense to empower people to lead. And it's a story around, even as a leader, when you know the answer or you know the solution or you know the outcome, not immediately blurting that out or immediately solving the problem for the team, but how do you position yourself in a way to allow them to grow while still contributing and advising them in the process? I just want to tee you up to tell. You got like 6 stories that I really love out of the 7 that you tell. I love all 6. Well, I love 6 really, really, really so much. And the 7th is growing on me. No, I'm just joking.
Oh, I wish I knew which one was the 7th. So I think, are you talking about the handing back the pins?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, full disclosure, this isn't my story. This is a story that I've heard that I repeat. So I give credit where it's due. There's a lot of brilliant thinkers in the leadership space. And when I find and hear good things that resonate with me, I pass them on. So I think this this one might be out of Liz Wiseman's Multipliers book as well, but it's this idea that, okay, so and this could translate to any of our contexts. So we'll tell it kind of a generalized story, if you will. So let's say your team is working late into the night and they are struggling to find the solution and they have to pitch it to the client first thing the next morning. And you see them there struggling, you're kind of standing in the doorway and you're thinking, do I help them out or do I kind of let them keep struggling? But you're looking at your watch and it's getting kind of late and you can tell that they're getting kind of frustrated and beginning to squabble within the group. So you say, all right, you know what? I'm going to step up and I'm going to ask to borrow the pen for a minute. So you take the pen from the person at the whiteboard and you write down something that gives them a little bit of direction, not the full answer, not the solution, but something to get them back on track. And so the moral of the story, kind of goes like this. You could have written the answer, but why didn't you? Well, what happens if you walk in at the 11th hour and write the answer on the board? Well, you've got a bunch of frustrated people that say, if you knew the answer, leader, why are we still here at the 11th hour trying to figure it out? You could have saved us from the beginning. Versus, hey, we just figured it out because now we're going in the right direction. So as you can imagine, giving the team enough to set them on the right footing, but empowering them to realize that they can take it from there and get it to the finish line is really the heart of what we're trying to do as leaders. So it's knowing when to take the pen, but it's also knowing when to give that pen back so that they can figure the rest out for themselves.
I love that. Such a powerful story. Listen, first 2 or 3 times full attribution. After that, I'm saying I got this story from Rebecca. So
all good stories evolve, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Speaking of evolution, what are some of the things that you find yourself constantly reminding leaders, even as they move up the corporate ladder? As they move up to the top of the organization, there's sometimes as speakers or as leaders or as teachers or as coaches, there are these core messages that you say to yourself, no matter what's happening, for some strange reason, I keep coming back to reminding people of these 2 or 3 principles that you would think that these individuals with all of this influence, all of this power, all of this even know-how would remember, but they commonly forget. I'm commonly consistently having to remind people, at least the organizations that I work with or the people that I coach, of these 2 or 3 core things that are critical to their growth and development. What are a handful of those things?
Well, at the risk of, again, borrowing from other really famous people with better ideas than mine, I think it's the importance of the why in every context. And not just sort of a communication tactic, but respect. If I can tell a really quick story from my own experience where that really hit me. When I started graduate school, I'll never forget this. My first semester, I was doing some data entry for someone who was working on her doctoral dissertation. And apparently I didn't do such a great job because I got called into the office by my mentor. And I remember this conversation as if it were yesterday. And it was a good, quarter of a century ago now. And she sat me down and she said, Rebecca, I want to talk to you about something. And I said, okay. She said, I noticed that there were some errors in your data entry that you've been doing. And immediately I was like, well, there was multiple people doing data entry. It probably wasn't me. I'm sure it wasn't my errors, right? As we often do. It couldn't have been me. And in fact, I was so confident about it that I said that to her. And she said, well, no, we can kind of see who did which pieces of the data. And so I was like, okay, so I guess it was really me. And she could have very easily said, this is not acceptable. The attention to detail is not what we expect here. It's your first semester in graduate school, right? But she took a different approach and she said, I need you to understand why, and here's where the why comes in. That is a bigger deal than probably what you realize. When her data goes in wrong and it comes out wrong, she's drawing the wrong conclusions and the paper's not getting written up properly. And she's informing real people at real organizations how to do this very important thing. And it all comes back to this really one small task. And something went off in my mind, this light bulb in the moment, because I'm not really like a monotonous task kind of person. But when I realized the bigger impact that that was going to have on someone else's research, not even mine, but someone else's, something stuck in me. And she very well could have just reprimanded me. But by explaining the why, she taught me a life lesson that to this day, I still teach to my kids. Here's why that matters. When no one's looking, get it right because there's a bigger impact. So I think whether we're talking about interpersonal, difficult conversations, and I need you to understand where I'm coming from, Pierre, I didn't mean it that way, and here's why, to trying to convince a board of some big thing that we want to implement. I think giving our why sort of makes us human, it makes us credible, and it makes us more approachable in people's minds.
We got to go back to the top, to the beginning of our conversation. I'm gonna ask you to tie this up for us based on what you just said. Mm-hmm. We're working Fortune 500. We're working on an assembly line. Mm-hmm. We're working fast food.
Yeah.
Why is it important for us as leaders to remind people of the impact that their simple or complicated task has on the whole piece of it, and how does that contribute to empowering others to be successful?
First and foremost, I think all of us deserve to feel good about the work that we're doing. Work is called work, but it's how we spend our time. And so I think just as a fundamental human right, it's work and it's not always going to be fun, but I think it should always be fulfilling. And the way that it's fulfilling is understanding the positive impact, whether you are flipping burgers or you are, sitting and supporting people from a social work perspective, or you're a nurse in a hospital, you are making a difference. And so I think reminding people of what that is, my son's getting ready to go do inventory over Christmas break at a local shop that has like 5 million cards. So he's going to be scanning card after card after card. It would be very easy to say, why does this matter? Why do I need to do this? But all it takes is one word from the manager of that organization coming to him and saying, hey, I couldn't have done this last year without you. I really need you to come back and help me over Christmas. That one minor flip made what could have felt like a super monotonous task something really important on behalf of the business. So I think from that standpoint, there's the sort of feel good answer, but then I think there's also a business case. Going back to what we said before about how do you transition from being a leader of individual contributors to a leader of leaders as you're trying to climb the ladder. The selfish answer is it frees you up. If you find the best in others and you plug in the things that they do really well, they're going to run with it. And that frees you up to operate at that next higher level. So you can do that strategic thinking. You can, dare I say, invest in your own learning and growth and development. You can think at the higher level of where the business needs to head and grow your network and all of those things that matter for you. So it's kind of one of those win-win situations. See the best in them, help them believe in what they're capable of, and free yourself up to continue on your own leadership journey as well.
Rebecca, I've enjoyed our conversation this evening. Thanks for taking part of your Monday and hanging out with us on Reflecting Forward. I want to ask you, how can we get in contact with you? How can we keep in touch? What can we hire you for? No need to be humble here. I know that you're amazing, and I want the audience to know you're amazing as well. And if they want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
You're super kind. Find me on LinkedIn. I think that's the fastest way to catch me. Connect with me there. And then we can sync up after that. Coaching, I love sitting. I will always find it a great privilege to sit with any human and hear about their life and try to be helpful. Leadership development stuff, if you want to implement something more broadly across your organization, we need to build it out. We need to facilitate it. We need to chat about it, or you just need to help think about it in a different way. I'm always open and grateful for the opportunity as well.
We had a great conversation with Rebecca on this episode of Reflecting Forward. If you found value in Rebecca's conversation this evening, or even watching the replay of this, or if there's a part that still just, she dropped a couple of gems for us and you're like, yeah, this part really resonates with me, feel free to drop that in the comments on YouTube or on LinkedIn. We'll go to those After we take a quick break, we end our segment with questions, comments, and answers. And we'll take a break. We'll do questions, comments, and answers, and I'll tell you what to look forward to for the rest of the week. Rebecca, thanks again. Glad you were with us this evening.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Anytime.
Okay, powerful interview conversation with Rebecca. Make sure you reach out to her on LinkedIn. I know some of you are saying, "Hey, Pierre, I'm not on LinkedIn. I'm watching this on YouTube. What am I supposed to do?" We will make sure that we either drop Rebecca's email address or her organization's URL into the chat, or we'll put it in the post where you're watching this video to make sure that you're able to connect with her. There was a lot going on in the conversation today. Rebecca gave you a little bit of her story. She gave you a little bit of the story of some of the clients and organizations that she has worked with as well. And we had some pieces come up in conversation today. Well, let's go all the way back to the top. We started with a conversation on how do we empower people through recognition. And we told the tale of two organizations. We juxtaposed them. We had Sheila at the beginning of our show this evening and her nearly 40 years of service at a drive-through fast food restaurant, and how the whole town celebrated her for her contribution to that community, and how on her final day, they said, everything that we make today is coming to you. It's coming in your direction. Versus a very, very popular fast food chain where the individual, after 20 plus years of service, on his final day was given a bag of goodies, a goodie bag. And the internets came to the rescue and celebrated him for the work that he did. And then we went into our conversation with Rebecca about how do we empower others to lead? How do we empower them to succeed? And a lot of that has to deal with, or is connected to, really how we think about ourselves and how we show up and the standard that we set and the model that we share for everyone. I know you valued that conversation. You want to reach out to Rebecca. We got her email address on the screen, so make sure you connect with her. We had some comments. Our team was in the back watching. We had applause happening. We had our team was like, I got to go back and watch this. A lot was happening here. Composition said, we love hearing people's backstory. It's almost a roadmap. Would have never combined the thought to combine psychology and business. I really liked how Rebecca set that up for us, because there are many of us who don't even know about IO, about industrial and organizational psychology. And what if you have a leaning or inkling toward business and psychology? You can marry those two, or they can at least date and hang out for 7 years for you to get your PhD in the way that Rebecca did. This other comment, Composition dropped this on us earlier. Helping leaders play to their native strength was a very, very powerful reminder. How do we as leaders think through our native strengths? How do we double and triple down on those? And then how do we surround ourselves with people who recognize and who are willing to leverage their native strengths as well? Kirk Nugent talked about the shouting out pivotal supporters. Rebecca mentioned a couple of people in her journey that were very, very helpful to her. Critical supporters. And think through, I noticed the end of the year, regardless of your faith tradition or holiday tradition or whatever you got going on with your family and your community, there is always an opportunity to thank. And thanking can be tangible. To thank someone with words. People still write letters. The post office still works, or maybe there's a different way of tangibly thanking someone for their contribution to your life, even if it was a whole bunch of years ago. Even if it was 10, 20 years ago, going back, picking up the phone, DMing or instant messaging someone on social media, finding a way to get in contact with them, sending them a gift through Amazon, however it works for you. What are the ways? And I know many of the people that were pivotal supporters for you said you can't pay it back. You find a way to pay it forward. But think through, what are the ways for me to just recognize the people who were central, pivotal, who played a very, very important part to my growth and my success. And not just, to pull it back to the top of our show this evening, not just the people in the past who were pivotal contributors. How are we doing that for our team? Because recognition, because awareness, hey, I see you, hey, I value you, goes a long way to empower people to succeed. Okay. That's pretty much all we got for this segment of Reflecting Forward. We had a great conversation tonight with Rebecca. I know you're going to go back and watch it, or you're watching the replay of it. You're finishing up the replay of it. Kirk says he's going to go back and watch it. However it lands for you, make sure the parts that really captured you, drop those in the comments on LinkedIn and on YouTube. We got 2 more this week, 2 more of our 3-part, maybe 3 nights to clarity as we're rounding out 2024. Got a conversation with my good friend, Chris Bartley. We're going to continue in our theme of empowering others for leadership. We're going to talk about trusting the journey, trusting the story, and how we continue to do that. That's Tuesday at 7 p.m. And then on Wednesday at 7 p.m., we're going to have a conversation with my good friend, Elliot Brooks. And he's going to talk about a little bit how we close those gaps that we see, especially coming down to the end of the year. And we look back and we think maybe we missed some things. What are the things that leaders can do to close the gap as we transition from one year to the next? Hey, we got a shout out from Dia Girl Custom Virtual Services. She said she handles all of our systems and processes, and if she says it was a great show, that means it was a great show. It was also a great show because my good friend Rebecca was here, and whenever we get a chance to work together, it's always a good time. Be sure to hit her up on her email address. Be sure to follow her on LinkedIn and get connected. And if you're looking for a speaker or a coach or a consultant to work for your organization or partner with your organization, feel free to reach out to Rebecca. Hey, that's all I got for this episode of Reflecting Forward. Usually I would say, hey, join us on the 2nd and 4th Sunday of every month. But tonight I'm saying join us tomorrow night, 7 p.m., because this is the place where we look back with clarity so that we can move forward with certainty. We're happy to do it for the rest of this week. Take care. We'll see you next time.